You're watching HFO-TV.
So I'm Chris Stevens, actually a police officer with the city of Troutdale. I'm assigned to the East Metro Gang Enforcement Team, along with Brad here. What we are is a team of 6 officers and 1 sergeant that do nothing but gang enforcement. So I promise you, nobody at this table has written you a ticket, or towed your car or anything even remotely close to that. That's all we do is gang enforcement. I've been a police officer since 2006. The entire time I've been with the city of Troutdale. The last year I've been on the team. To get on the team, it's a specialty assignment, so it's something you have to actually want to do, and then you have to compete for it. You have to test for it against other applicants, and then be ultimately selected for it.
My name is Brad Robertson. I work for the Fairview Police Department. I've been there for about 5-6 years, and prior to that, I was a deputy sheriff and deputy coroner in Montana before I came out here. I'm also in the Army for a while in intelligence. I've been on the gang team for 2 years. Just like Chris said, all we do is gang enforcement activities, and there's been a significant spike, especially in Multnomah County over the past year to 2 years. I know Portland, we share a lot of the same clients that they see. But if you have any, we'll get into it more. As Chris was saying about the East Metro Gang Enforcement Team, it also includes officers, 2 officers from Gresham, 2 deputies from Multnomah County, and then the sergeant is from the Gresham Police Department. And we work out of the new Rockwood building in Gresham, located at 181st and Gleason.
I'm Pat Walsh, I'm the captain in charge of the Tactical Operation Division, which houses our gang team in Portland and the CERT team and the bomb team and all the airplane, all the cool stuff. I don't work like these guys do. I'm the captain, but I haven't written a ticket in 20 years, so you guys haven't getting anything from me. Basically, I just manage those teams, and as Chris and Brad said, gang crime is up and it's moving, and we'll talk more about that. But it's not like in the old days where it was neighborhood centric. It's really moved. You know, mobile technology has caused, and the housing market has caused families and gangs to move. And so if you look at our hotspot map from shootings from 10 years ago, a lot of them were neighborhood specific. You look at them now, they're all over Gresham, all over Portland. So it's different work than when I was a gang officer and when I did work. So, and these guys will talk more about what they're seeing.
So the East Metro Gang Enforcement Team, I talked about how it's composed of the different agencies. We're paid for through a state grant through OIA, the Oregon Youth Alliance. So they set aside money which has to be renewed every 2 years. We have to fight for that funding every 2 years. If that funding were to go away, East Multnomah County, it wouldn't likely cease to have a gang team, but it would be up to the individual agencies at Gresham, Multnomah County, and Troutdale and Fairview to pay for the officers to exist to have that gang team. So if OIA's funding ever were to go away, actually the smaller agencies like Fairview and Troutdale, we would actually just end up laying off those officers because our agencies couldn't afford to endure that expense. We do presentations monthly to a lot of different groups. It's rare that we have an audience such as this. Most of the time our audiences are high schools, parents, other police officers, district attorneys, and any other more government specific type groups.
I'm assuming nobody was here to be scared straight. Right?
Yeah.
It's typically what we're used to doing.
Yeah.
So you bear with us if it's a little informal, which sounds like that's what you wanted anyway, so it's good. But we don't have like a PowerPoint set up for you or anything like that. We're here to just basically let you know that there is a gang problem in East Multnomah County. It's being addressed by the team, and there's obviously issues that we face. And what I would encourage apartment owners is to open up that line of communication, to not distance yourself to where you're not aware of what's going on in your apartment. Gresham Police actually now has a neighborhood enforcement team. If you guys have apartments in Gresham, you've probably already been introduced to them. There are 2 officers that are assigned to do nothing but apartment and neighborhood enforcement, some of those problem spots, and really be that liaison between police and the owners.
Those guys also work with owners and banks where there are properties that have been vacant and there are squatters, transients, or perhaps gang members that are just vandalizing them. They work with one of the more difficult things that we have as police, if we have a property or even an apartment complex, is we have to find a specific victim to enforce crimes like criminal mischief, which is specific to vandalism, or any of the other property crimes. If we don't have a person that's willing to testify at grand jury to be a victim for that property, the district attorney's office won't prosecute on those crimes. So if someone were to own a building and we can't contact that person and it's been tagged all over with gang graffiti, I can't arrest the person even if I can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that they committed the crime. Without the victim, there's not much that we can do with that. So that might be one of the concerns that you have as a property owner. And I think Captain Walsh mentioned it a little bit. For gang crime, it really a lot of times now follows anywhere TriMet goes for the trains and all the apartment complexes that are around the MAX. One of the things that we've seen specifically around 162nd and Burnside is that in, say, 4 or 5 different apartment complexes, there'll be 8 to 10 different gang sets in those groups. So you might end up with a Blood gang member living next to a Crip gang member, and obviously that might not be good for the rest of the tenants in that property. That happens more frequently than you'd think. Just recently we had 2 Hispanic gangs, one called CSK, the Crazy Stoner Crew, and some of the names get a lot more brazen and ridiculous than that. 5 kids, well, 3 of them were adults, beat a man senseless with a razor scooter at 162nd Stark. He had brain damage and a broken elbow. But these attacks are becoming a lot more frequent and very random and pretty senseless. We've had, about a half a dozen stabbings in the past 2 or 3 months of one rival gang attacking another rival member.
I wish it was clear cut as the movies are, where you just have a block and an avenue, and you just know you stay away from that block, and this is the MS-13's block, this is the Crips block, and it's not. It's all just molded together, and I believe Portland's the same way. I mean, there's some small, certain areas that are specific to parks for gang sets, but for the most part, it's like Brett said, you can have rival gang members living in the same apartment complex just based on where they were assigned to live.
Yeah, one of the problems we see, and it's why you're here today to network, is that apartment management doesn't network with each other. So we'll do a really good job of working a case and working a case on somebody in their apartment, do a search warrant, and then that person gets evicted, and they end up across the street at another apartment complex. And we don't know where they end up, and so the next thing you know, we're doing that case again because they're back doing what they do. And so a couple years ago, we did get some management together and say, look, talk to each other. And one of the biggest problems we have is gang members predominantly don't rent apartments; their girlfriends do. And so you have this sweet young girlfriend with a great background, and you're not going to find that. You know, she's going to be a nice girl, and then the next thing you know, they come and move in. And so you really have to be on top of it. I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job, but apartments that we really get along with and do good work with is a manager that's on top of that. You know, if a boyfriend moves in, then you need to get that name and put that person on the list, because they don't want to be on your list. They don't want you to know they're there. But we've had a lot of success with managers talking to other managers saying, hey, this guy, I'm kicking him out, and you don't want him. Trust me, he's going to show up. And so when you guys talk, it does make your life better and ours better as well. And then the other thing about girls, they don't really care about sets. They'll date a Blood, and as soon as they're done with him, they'll date a Crip. And now you got 2 guys that hate each other for two reasons. One, they're opposite gang members, and they're pissed that they've got a girl in common. And really, a lot of our shootings end up being over the girl than over the sets. So pay attention to the girls, especially ones that are really nice to you when they sign their application.
Some of the apartment property managers that I've worked with too, they have legal teams that are very proactive in putting specific clauses into the rental agreements that say any gang activity can result in being evicted. And it's very easy for us as investigators to find proof that a certain person is active in a gang. One of the things that we use is the internet, and I have a fake Facebook account, and more often than not, if I can find the guy's street name, I can find his Facebook account, and he'll be taking photos of himself either doing drugs with marijuana, with a gun, or posing as a pimp of some sort. And while that might not be enough for me to arrest him because it's not beyond a reasonable doubt for a crime, it is evidence of him being a gang member, and I could submit that to the property managers and have that person evicted that way too.
Is there particular wording that you would recommend to that effect?
I wouldn't be able to recommend that specifically, but I know that there are several property managers in East County that do have that wording, and I can't remember the name because it just switched over. Guardian Management used to own the Fairview Oaks and Woods, and they had a clause in their rental agreements that they used to evict people. But since then, there's a new property manager, and I haven't met him yet, that owns that complex. It's no longer Guardian.
You think your neighborhood response guys?
Yeah, if the neighborhood officers that you would want to contact with the Gresham Police Department, I don't have their phone number, but I can give you their names. Names are James Leake, and it's Leake, and it's Daniel, right?
Estes.
Daniel Estes, and his last name is spelled Estes. And the name of their team is the Neighborhood Enforcement Team, or NET, and it's just been created this past month. And they might be able to guide people to find specific legal language for those sorts of
Is that a better contact and go to net first before they, I mean, they're not going to call you directly, or is that?
I'll gladly give, if you want my cell phone number, I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you right now. Again, my name's Brad Robertson. My duty cell phone is 503-209-0072. If you can't get in touch with anybody and you want specific information, call me and I'll at least get you to the right person. If it is specific about gangsters that are living in your apartments, I'll be more than happy to help you with it too.
And I'll leave the card here. If you have properties in Portland, we have neighborhood response teams and they'll have that language because we work with apartments and they sign trespass agreements with us, so that at 3 o'clock in the morning when we have a problem, we can actually act as your agent and make arrests because we have an agreement with you saying, hey, if you catch people doing X, Y, and Z, go ahead and take care of it, and we will, be a willing victim. The other thing that you should know too is that we're not all about enforcement. We kind of, I don't know, these guys are probably the same. We have a local police, public safety coordinating council, and we're trying to figure out how to deal with the gang problem. And yes, enforcement is very effective because it's pretty dramatic. But we also, we've started what's called a GIFT program. It's a gang impacted family team. And what we've done is we've reached out to the most notorious gang members that we know are second and third generation gang members. A lot of gang members are born into it. They're not beat into it like you see in the movies. And so we reached out to them and said, look, you can go to jail like your dad or go get killed like your dad or your brothers or your uncles, or what do you want? You want to get educated? You want to get a job? What do you want? And they're shocked, they're bowled over, they can't believe that the police and the district attorney and the judges and we have this group of people to sit down with them. So we've had some success. We've got a couple kids working, we've got a couple in college, one's in prison for doing a heck of a shooting, and so, but we're trying. So we're reaching out to them, and then we're reaching down to the younger group and trying to mentor them. We have a huge mentorship program in Portland. So it's kind of, enforcement, reach out to the hardcore guys, and we're also trying to reach out to the young guys too. But in the meantime, if you have an apartment complex, especially with summer coming up, I don't think you want these guys to figure out that's your apartment complex is where they're going to party. So that's why we're here today, and we're available.
What are your telltale signs for gang activity? I mean, from an ownership standpoint, it's not there. They're not there 24 hours a day.
From an owner's standpoint, graffiti is predominantly with Hispanic gangs. So if you see any sort of graffiti, if it's blue, if it includes the number 13, it's likely from a Sereno gang set, which is a Hispanic gang set. If it's red and includes the number 14, it's from a Norteño, which is another Hispanic gang set. Those are
tagging where they live?
Yes.
So they're tagging
The Norteños will actually place, they'll also place 4 dots in specific Norteños. 3 dots is for Serenos. But the Norteños gangs at 17010 Southeast Stark actually painted their emblem on their door to announce that they are existence, are present.
Which Norteños are outnumbered about
10 to 1.
9 to 10, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can see why advertising the 1% or the 10% attracts all the other guys that's not cool with.
And the low levels that we see, well, this is more specific to the Hispanic gangs, are that they end up being kind of the mules once they've been in the gang long enough for some of the drug cartels that exist in and around the area. So if we see a gang member that stays a gang member into his late teens, early 20s, into his late 20s, and he stays active and manages to stay out of jail, it's more than likely that he's gotten some sort of connection into one of the heroin or other drug cartels that import into Portland. Graffiti, like I said, that's generally specific to Hispanic gangs. It's not that often that we've seen black or white gangs use graffiti. And that's one thing that I want to emphasize too is I think predominantly in the news there are articles about Hispanic and black gangs, but white gangs do exist. They actually tend to be a little bit more violent, and they're a little bit, well, they are very well armed. This past fall, the East Metro Gang Enforcement Team, our team, ATF, Portland Police, and the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office worked, it was called Operation White Christmas. I think we arrested about 40 people, and we recovered over 150 guns, and that's still getting sorted out federally. They're very present, and if you have white gang members in your apartment complexes, they're predominantly responsible for home invasion robberies and more violent crimes. A lot of the things that we see, at least at the street level, are things like drug sales and prostitution. And then we do have stabbings and drive-by shootings and things of that nature, but the white supremacist gangs that we dealt with tend to be a little bit more dangerous.
You asked a great question.
Yeah.
You know, the high school parties look just like they did when we were in high school. You kind of know that when you see it. So the problem we have when we tell people to pay attention is we don't want to call on that, because
Right.
high school kids are going to go do what the high school kids do. But, you know, what we do see with gang members when they're out partying, they're also a gang. They have to make money, and they're kind of like, that's what they do. They do illicit things to make money. So they might be partying, but at the same time you'll see people coming and going short periods of time buying dope. You might see them, we call Johns, you know, come in, and they might be running girls out of your apartments. And so you're gonna know that activity. That's gonna look different than just a high school party. So we always have problems people calling, and we end up showing up to a kid party, which we'll come to, that's fine. But it's the running girls and the selling dope. They have to do that to make money. And we would really like it if you saw really young girls with these guys, because they're running young juveniles up and down the West Coast, trafficking girls. So, which is one of our main focuses. You know, we do arrest them for drug dealing, but we would really like to arrest them for basically enslaving these girls. So but we can't solve those crimes without people calling us. So if you create a atmosphere where you're engaged and on top of your apartments, then your people in your apartment complex will feel like they could call us as well.
You guys have an estimate of total numbers of gang members in East County?
For East County, we have documented about 500 gang members, and we guess there's about 3 to 5 for every one that we don't have documented.
We have to go through a strict process of how we're able to document somebody as a gang member through the Department of Justice. So an actual member is somebody that we know from our training experience is a gang member. They're advertising as a gang member. They've committed a crime due to being a gang member. They'll admit to you that they're a gang member. They have tattoos of the gang. There's this whole criteria that we have to fit for a member. Now, you can have a guy that meets several of those criteria but isn't actually a member. He's more of an associate is what we call that. And so those aren't including associates. And so that's and then those are only ones that have actually gotten our attention to where they've actually committed the crime, and we've contacted them and then documented them.
When we take people to jail, they get classified inside the jail so that they know where to put them, so they don't create problems. And they have about 5,000 documented gang members in Multnomah County. Now, that includes people that are transient, that are California and Nevada, and people that are here, but that's a bigger number.
Right now, the local Public Safety Coordinating Committee, LIPSIC, they are in the process of documenting just the different gangs in Multnomah County, and we just met with the research specialist on that last week, and I think she said there's just over 200 gang sets in Multnomah County. That's all East Multnomah County and the entire county, not just East Multnomah County.
So there's 200 gangs and 500 gang members. That seems a little light.
No, 5,000.
Oh, 5,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're a little stricter in Portland because we were sued in the 90s and had to get rid of our list completely. So our process is a little more detailed, and so we have probably 750 people documented. But what happens is they fall off the list. Our list is shorter. I think by law you can keep a list for 5 years. Ours is 4. So
What about the methadone clinic that was on 162nd and Burnside? That seemed to be the hotbed when I first moved here, and it certainly was the apartment communities around there. That disappeared. Has the problem disappeared?
162nd,
158th, 162nd?
The one by,
yeah, right on Gleason,
Yeah.
next to the plasma center. No, it still exists. There's plenty of drug activity there. Or is it on Burnside? Okay.
Yeah, so methadone clinic disappeared. I don't know where it went.
Yeah.
So that's still, that
But-
corner still is a hotbed of activity?
it is in the apartment complex. I don't know if, is anybody here from that one? I don't know.
I have an apartment complex on 162nd and Burnside.
Yeah.
We're off the street on the flag lot. We call ourselves the rose among the thorns. There are no gang members in our apartment building, but we do see the problems that surround us.
So the apartment complex that's right there on 163rd in Gleason there, just to give you an idea, police officers in general, not gang enforcement, but police officers in general are not allowed to even go into that apartment complex with no less than 3 of us to respond to anything. And that's just,
Did you have a question? I'm sorry,
I
ma'am.
did. So of these members that you're talking about, regardless if they're Latino or whatever, how many of them are in the country legally? Do you have any idea? In other words, is ICE or immigration a possibility to address it, or are they just going to revolving door them and push them back out?
We don't keep statistics on that. It's not part of the criteria that the Oregon Department of Justice requires us to track. That would be something for, the Homeland Security or Immigration and Customs
but if we
Enforcement.
get a member that's involved with a significant case, violent offense or something, and we will definitely use that as a tool to get them as a resolution.
So then perhaps as a follow-up, it's really important for the management company, or the owners, okay, or their management companies to establish a screening criteria that can potentially feather these people out, before they ever even get into the apartment complex. Is that correct?
It would be, but like Captain Walsh also said, part of the problem is that it's a girlfriend or another relative, and in this case, it would probably be somebody that is already naturalized or they have citizenship here anyway, and then it would be either a family member or friend, and they would stay in the apartment that way.
One thing, let me just share this with the other members that we're doing. We raised the credit score requirement, the FICO score, for everybody to come into our apartment complex. And we will not accept somebody with a taxpayer ID number. They have to have a verifiable green card or social security card. Okay, even the little card that comes in from, DHS that says for work purposes only, we will not accept that, because there's no way for us to be able to do a proper background check for you guys, okay, which is our first line of defense. So
Sure.
That's starting to have an impact in our community, and I would encourage others to do the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
How to screen somebody who's clearly not a citizen and determining whether they have a legitimate status here. And if they don't, I mean, what kind of liabilities are we running into by not,
Yeah.
It's a very difficult situation.
As long as it's applied across the board, the attorneys that we've been talking to say that it's completely legitimate to do.
I would say rarely do we have a non-citizen as a gang member. I mean, it's not unheard of. We have one of the largest Somalian populations in America here. A couple of those kids have grown up here and gotten into the gangs, so they grew up with gang members that are Americans. But, fortunately, in the Portland metro area, we haven't seen Somalian gangs like Minneapolis is seeing, and and if there's, we just don't see a lot of immigrants that are, they might be cartel members that are up here doing cartel business, but they're not the gang members that are out doing the violence. They're just here to sell dope and make money and stay under the radar. So,
Question, you're speaking about drug dealers and cartel members that live in apartments. Are there any of the cartel members, do they actually, is it all apartments, or are there individuals in family dwellings also?
I've seen them in apartments and single dwellings. I've seen them rent farm houses because they're out in the middle of nowhere. That's a great place to hide your dope. I mean,
Is there any kind of percentage that you could say, like a 75% apartments and 25% single?
I got it.
Because I think most of us have multiple family dwellings.
Yeah, I don't know if I could do it. I'd say a high percentage of apartments. Yeah. So.
Well, you know, we found, and this is not specifically Gresham, but we have another complex, that's drug ridden, and we raised our score, our screening score to 650. We haven't taken a drug dealer since. And so I have a theory. that there's not a drug dealer in the country that has a credit score 650. Now, you can't do that in Gresham, but you can parody off of it.
You know, my experience, I've been in the business 30 years. People that are committing crimes on a pretty daily, regular basis, they don't want to be noticed, especially by these guys, but you as well. So, you know.
That's why I'd encourage you to be active in your complexes, because again, crimes are, I mean, as a criminal, you want to have that perfect environment where you don't have somebody watching you, whether it's us or whether it's a nosy neighbor or whether it's apartment managers up in your business. You just don't want that. And so you're making their routine awkward, which is great.
Are they committing crimes within the complexes they live in? Do you guys see that as just more violent crimes? I mean, you brought up home invasions.
Home invasion, no. The thing we're seeing a lot of in the apartment complexes for
Dealing dope and prostitution. Yeah. The home invasions, they'll go to places that are a little bit more affluent.
And it's typically another dealer or
Yeah.
somebody that it's not like a random person. It's too high risk of a crime to just go blindfolded in.
And then, John, I was going to ask you, what are you doing with, as management, what do you do with, like they brought up the pretty young girl that's, rents the unit, and then all of a sudden, 2 months later, it's not her, it's boyfriend's in there, that,
First of all, you have to use a screening company that's going to be screening not only their current landlord, but go back 2 or 3 landlords. So, for instance, we use a company called Benrose Consulting that will go back 3 landlords, because the current landlord will often lie.
Just to get rid of it.
So you want a company that's going to go back 2 or 3 landlords, and Benrose Consulting does do that for us. Second, if we use a Metro multifamily, as many of you do, and it says 14 days for guests, and we enforce that strongly. And so our managers, they're working with that resident, and on that 14th day, we bring over an application and ask that we get the application fee and the application. If we don't get that within 2 or 3 days, we send a 14 days. We don't play. And another thing we do is make sure if we're ever tagged, we look carefully, because as I mentioned, there's somebody on your property that lives there. And it's often a 16 or 17 or even younger. And I'm sorry, but we evict the whole family. It's just, it's not fair to the whole family, but that's the only way it stops the activity, is by evicting them and getting them off our property.
Go ahead. She looks real, yeah.
Another way that we do at our community, which is over off the 207th and Gleason, is really build a working relationship with your postal service. Because you're right, you're going to get these people who come in and you only have that particular person. However, it's very common for the mail carrier to come in and say, hey, do you know this name? Well, if they're receiving mail there, you have an unauthorized access name. You immediately get on top of it, and they're out of there. So I highly recommend to landlords in the area, work with your mail carrier. They will tell you if there's mail coming in.
Yeah.
They have
I've been told that it's illegal to say anything bad about this person. Is there some unknown code that I haven't picked up
Yes.
yet?
On the advice of my attorney, that we're not saying anything. And if you get your report that comes back that way, you know that's the red flag, on the advice of my attorney.
And all we did is facilitate introductions, and so that you knew who the other apartment man, there's a lot of big apartments, well, you guys know, you own them, but the managers didn't really know each other. And then you could say, then they start talking, well, this is what I had this problem and I had that problem, and they might not even bring up the person, but they could start to formulate what they're seeing. Especially an apartment manager that's had a problem that's been resolved, then they can walk the other manager down the problems and the steps they took, so.
The most common problem seems to be the property next door. What rights do I have, or what can I do to encourage my neighbor to fix this property or the problems that are there?
Well, it depends on which city that would be in like Gresham, Fairview, and Troutdale. There are all ordinances that are specific to each of those cities about what the owner can do. Like, for example, in the city of Fairview, you can't have your car parked on your lawn. And if you have it there, I think for more than 48 hours, you can receive a fine from code enforcement. I'm not sure of what the city of Gresham has, but things like that. It's contacting those officers that I mentioned from Gresham, Leak and Esses and Gresham. You can contact me for Fairview, but it's knowing the city ordinances. And generally, all those cities have websites where you can access those ordinances. You can go to the city of Fairview, the city's website, and it'll list all of those ordinances that are specific to the neighbors.
Gang activity, drug dealing, prostitution, and it's across the street. What are my resources? Is calling you guys and saying?
Yeah, report it to the police and say, this is what I'm observing, yeah. So if it's a non-emergency situation, you call 823-3333, which is something that's not urgent, but just to report it and get it to the knowledge of the police.
One more time.
823-3333.
Or you could talk to the neighborhood response team and say, look, this is what I'm seeing. And they'll come out, they look like, plain clothes, they'll come out and see it for themselves. And we always like to have a place to be legally, to view the activity ourselves. And then it kind of takes you out of the loop, and they can start their investigation.
So not even gang specific, but police work in general. If we don't hear about it, we don't know that it's going on. If we don't know, that's why a lot of people, like, totally unrelated, but my car got broken into, but it was just an old cell phone taken or something small. It's not even a big deal. I'm not going to bother the police or whatever. No, bother the police, because if we don't know, we don't hear it from you, then we never knew it happened. And there could be several others that are doing victims of the same thing, and then we don't know where to focus our resources. So it's the same thing. If you're seeing that, odds are somebody else is seeing that, and the more noise you make, the more attention we give to that, because that's what we love to do. Our gang team is specific, is like 80 to 90% intelligence gathering and just looking on computers, going out and just talking to people, and then 10% acting on it. So, I mean, we love information. You're never going to be bothering us.
When do you approach it? Hopefully most owners are informed and doing their best. When do you brought up a deal with the police can't go?
Well, like for example,
you say, you know what, we got to call the owner, this is getting out of hand.
last summer at the Rockwood Station Apartments on 190th and Burnside, one of the simplest things, there was a homicide on June 8th, I believe, and we had a series of other issues that were specific to gangs with that apartment complex and in that area in general. That apartment complex had two entrances, one on Burnside and one on 190th. And what people would do is they would drive in the 190th side, drive around to the back of the complex, conduct their drug deals, and then come out in the Burnside. There were a couple of shootings, and they had two exits and entrances. What the owners did is they put a gate across 190th, so now there was a bottleneck. Now the people can only go in and out one side. Well, that's a lot easier for police to monitor, and it cuts down the traffic. So that simple gate up solved a huge amount of problems. We haven't seen nearly as much activity in that apartment complex just because of that.
But are you reaching out and giving that?
Right. Well, yeah, officers are reaching out and talking to them about that, what all the solutions are. Another thing that Gresham did several years ago, also along that same street on 190th, it used to be that you could park cars on either side of that street. And it was causing all sorts of problems with, wrecks, cars getting broken into, just a lot of property type crime and loitering and things like that. So they just put up no parking signs on either side of the street. So then gangsters couldn't come and park and loiter there. That was an easy thing for the city of Gresham to be able to do. And they also got the owners to put up large fences along either side of that street too. So there wasn't foot traffic going back and forth, and it inconvenienced drug users and drug dealers from going back and forth across the street.
Are you aligned with other county enforcement, and is this something that's unusually specific to East County, Multnomah, or is this just all across I-5 or all Oregon?
I think gangs are here to stay. We're not going to get rid of them. If anything, they're just going to get moved around. The agencies that we work with are LIPSIC, the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office, and of course our team is multi-agency itself. We work with the the Portland Gang Enforcement Team. But I think for East County, what would be important to see are the city of Portland has a lot more resources than we currently do to offer gang members and their families to stop the cycle. And the city of Gresham has added, the gentleman's name is Joe Walsh, no relation to the captain here, but he's a gang outreach coordinator for the city of Gresham. They've added that position onto the city, and we're starting to model a lot of the other public entities that you need to fight gang violence, other than police activities, with getting these models from cities like Portland and the district attorney's office. The District Attorney Underhill has actually tasked out a specific deputy district attorney. His name is Nathan Vasquez. He works with us in the Rockwood office. He's got a project called Renew, which is specific to deal with gang crime, and it's got many prongs to it. It's not just enforcement. It's getting other resources out to families and to apartment owners and a variety of other people that are all involved in the specifically Rockwood community to help deal with these problems.
But is gang activity disproportionate in East County, or is it seen elsewhere in the state in this degree?
No, I think Portland Metro has, for example, Washington County has a gang team called IGET. Clark County and Vancouver, they have their own gang team. Portland has GET, the East Multnomah County the East Multnomah County Gang Enforcement Team. That's our team. And Clackamas County also has their own gang team. So all the police agencies have recognized that it is an issue out here, but I think that's also kind of a condition of having a metropolitan environment. It's going to exist, and you have to create those teams in order to deal with it.
So with Washington State passing their marijuana law, how has that impacted? Do you see more marijuana being brought across from the state of Washington since it's quasi-legal over there, even though it's not legal to sell it? But I mean,
I personally have seen zero spike or any difference at the street level with enforcement or anything like that. If I didn't know that it passed, there'd be nothing. I wouldn't know. I haven't seen any difference.
Yes, sir.
Question, I'm wondering if you can be some help in my particular situation. I have an apartment complex in Gresham that has two entrances, a front entrance and a back entrance. The back entrance is a constant source of traffic problems because the sight distance is not sufficient. There's a lot of accidents there. So back about 10 years ago, I gated that off. And for 5 or 6 years, the gate stayed there, the tenants didn't care, and everything was fine until some inspector said, hey, this guy's gated this off. And they made me take it out. And I tried to explain all of the above to them, that during the past time period, we had no crime. Mm-hmm. Now we have, with regularity, 3 carjackings a year. They come in sequences of 3, and they leave us alone, and they come back, there's going to be 3 carjackings. I put up a security system. We can see them doing it. We can see the way they walk, but we can't get their license plate number or anything else. So, would you help me screen that entrance off again?
We'll go park our SWAT rig, just set it right there and leave it for you. No, what I would recommend is to contact, like I said, those officers, Jim Leake or Dan Estes, and probably also the City of Gresham Attorney's Office to see about what it would take for their inspector to come to terms with the fact that it might be a better idea to have that gated off, or what
take the entrance out.
What could be done to affect that so that the 3 carjackings don't occur in that. But
Because carjackers definitely like 2 entrances.
Mhm.
They love it.
yeah, yeah.
When you guys bring up, you brought it up as well, you bring up a good point. We do work with zoning and, Water Bureau works with us, building department. I mean, we have all those resources. We call them in and they can do their enforcement part of it too. But if you have a good argument for it not being there, those officers should be able to help you. Because it kind of makes sense. There's accidents, there's crime, taking all that into account, you have a good argument.
Well, what happened is that when I bought the complex, it was one big complex, and then the state condemned the right of way. And they're perfect right to do that, and everything was kosher. But the sight distance out of this back entrance is not enough.
Yeah.
And where people should go 35 miles an hour on Eastman Avenue, they go 50, 55, and there's an accident.
Yep.
Bad.
Yep.
What do you guys track, speaking of cars, are you tracking gang members' cars? I mean, if we have unauthorized parking in a parking lot, is it advantageous, say, is it, Honda Accord, here's a license plate?
Yeah,
It's
like,
not under a tenant?
yeah, like Officer Stevens said, a lot of things we do is 80 to 90% intelligence gathering. So it's almost like a preventative maintenance sort of thing. So once the gangsters commit their crime, we like to know who they are, what they're driving, and where they're hanging out. And we do that by monitoring them all the time. So if you think, or anybody, let's say the manager or even another tenant calls you and says, this car is here and I don't think anybody owns it, or it's associated with this guy and I know he's a drug dealer, if that gets called back to us, it's just an identification of another vehicle that we can put up on our radar to monitor and see where it's going. Because very likely if that vehicle's at one of your apartment complexes, it's going to be at somebody else's apartment complex here and it's going to be making rounds. If you remember, actually there was another gang-related homicide at 173rd and Cooch in Gresham last summer, and that was because 2 rival drug dealers were fighting over the same territory to sell their dope, and it was a car that did not belong in the apartment complex that was there. So information like that is very helpful.
And we have a lot of technology too, so if we get a call and you think there's gang activity, we go there and we'll send a plate reader and they'll read all the plates. And we actually, when we get to a place and there's 6 gang members together and 3 of them are on parole, well, they're not, one of the conditions of their parole, they're not supposed to be with other gang members. So we'll tell the parole officer and they'll call them in and put an ankle bracelet on them. So we're tracking people. We have gang members walking around with ankle bracelets for that minor of an offense because they're out gangbanging when they're not supposed to be.
Right.
And believe it or not, some of our shootings we saw because the kid with the ankle bracelet was the one that did the shooting. So we're able to go back and solve those shootings. But we wouldn't know that he's engaging in activity, and we wouldn't know to tell the parole officer if somebody doesn't call us.
Well, what about for parking lots, cameras, lighting? I mean, are you seeing a big
Yeah, well,
difference, or-
one of the
Lighting is
lighting is crucial. Surveillance equipment that you have on your properties, for whoever your managers are, it's very important that the cameras are actually functioning and recording. There have been a number of times we go to investigate crimes and we see what look like to be great cameras on their property, but they haven't recorded. Another important thing to know about those surveillance systems is how often they reboot, or so to speak, like how long do the police have to access that information? Is it 72 hours before it gets re-recorded over, or is it a month? Like grocery stores tend to hold their information for a month, so if we see, or banks do, for example, so if we see the guy go in and rob a bank, we've got about a month to obtain that video surveillance. Knowing those times is really crucial. That's very helpful for us. And also security systems, like this gentleman was talking about, if they are, you kind of get what you pay for. So it's very useful for us to be able to see colors of clothing, license plates, although I know those systems tend to be very expensive, or at least colors of cars or makes of vehicles. But if all we have is kind of a gray blob of a person wearing a dark colored jacket, we might not even be able to tell the race or gender of that individual. And if we don't have even basic information like that, the surveillance equipment might be up, but it's not useful to solving the crime. Yes?
I have just a couple quick questions. In Portland, who do I need to contact to sign a trespass agreement?
Depends where your property is.
89th and Woodstock?
Yeah, you know what, I'll give you my card, you can send me an email and I'll connect you with the right person.
Okay, and then my other
It's for any issues with properties.
It's livability issues.
Livability issues. So if you have transients that are squatting on property, anything like that, they'll be able to help you out. If it's gangster related, we'll get it, but we'll work in coordination with them on what those issues are.
Why do you think it's spiked in the last 2 years?
A lot of the people that were arrested in the late 90s, early 2000s did prison time, and it's starting to cycle out, so they're coming back out onto the streets. That's one of the issues. Another one of the issues is the fact that public safety is really, really expensive. And if you look at officers per 1,000 people, like in Gresham, I think the news article that I just read is Gresham has about 1.1 officers per 1,000 people. I think Portland has about 1.57 officers per 1,000 people. FBI standards recommend that in metropolitan areas you have between 1.5 and I think 2.7, depending on how hard or how bad your crime rates are.
Can I
Yeah,
add
yeah,
to that?
yeah.
The other problem is too is, you know, we had 106 shootings last year. We're up to 44 already in Portland this year. But very few people have been hit. But those shootings are related to, a lot of them are related to murders that occurred a year ago. In Portland, there's 2 murders that were very emotional, and it's not just, it's a family thing. And so when you kill somebody, it becomes very personal. And so it's kind of a feud. And that feud just, with all these shootings, that just becomes more, they're more wound up about it. So, you know, if we can make arrests on the murders, it would calm things down, but the problem is nobody tells us who the suspect is or what they saw. We have a terrible time with witnesses. Even the victims that are shot in the hospital tell us to pound sand and leave. And, you know, last week I went and talked to a kid who shot 3 times in the chest, and he said, I didn't see the guy. Well, the neighbor said, I heard him arguing before the shot, so he knows who shot him, and he'll take care of it. That's the mentality. So it's really hard to, it's hard because it grows.
That's one of the things that, specific to gang enforcement, that we face, that I'd never had to face when I was working for regular Troutdale police. I'd go help you because somebody broke into your car, and if I need you to come to court, I can reach you by phone. I can work with you. There's satisfaction. There's you know what I mean. When I go to a stabbing, my victim is yesterday's suspect. And so, you know, it's not your perfect victim, I guess you would say, in a lot of things we do. And sometimes that will prevent the actual prosecution and the jail time, and it's just a cycle that keeps going. So, again, it's not that anybody's not enforcing gang. It's not that, it's just that's the environment that we have to deal with.
Thank you.
Good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching HFO-TV. To learn more about HFO, call or visit our website.